Tack Hour. And yes, that's right, folks. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, we are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcast network operating and the shows coming. So, if you enjoy the information, the discussions, the lectures, the guests and hosts on the other shows on the network, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to libertyworksradionetwork.com and get signed up as a monthly subscribing member. Even if it's as little as $15, $20 a month, every membership counts, and we do, again, need your support to keep the information coming. And if you want to get fully informed on the maladministration, the unconstitutional administration and enforcement of the federal income tax, you got to head over to taxfreedom.com and start reading and get educated, because everybody in the country knows. Everybody knows there's something very, very wrong with the way the IRS behaves and acts and treats the American people. And this website explains exactly what it is that is wrong. Because while everybody knows there's something wrong, nobody seems to be able to identify what it is exactly that is wrong. And it's been wrong since World War II. So if you want to get informed and take back your freedom by taking back your paycheck, which takes back your economic power, which takes back your political power, find your way over to taxfreedom.com and start reading. And if you know anyone that needs help dealing with the IRS administratively or with the Department of Justice in court over tax issues, personal income tax issues, send them to irszoom.com, where they can get affordable but substantial help answering either the IRS administratively or the DOJ in court. Okay, so what's happening this week? Well, I guess, of course, the big story is the government is reopening. Well, maybe. I guess actually they passed the bill in the House and Trump signed it earlier today. So theoretically, they should be opening in a few days. There's some $90 billion in gross national product they estimate was lost during the, 6 weeks of the shutdown. And boy, are the Democrats pissed. They are mad as hell that Schumer couldn't contain the Senate Democrats because 8 of them departed from the Democrat Party position, very unusually, because the Democrats hardly ever break ranks and almost always vote en masse along the party lines, regardless of how absurd the party line is. Nobody in the Democrat Party except Manchin objected to open borders. Nobody. Or to any of the other policies put in place by senile Joe. But they're pissed now. 8 Democrats broke with the party, voted with the Republicans to open the government because they recognize the Democrats are starting to take more heat than the Republicans about the shutdown, despite the fact that the Democrats and the media spend all their time telling people it's the fault of the Republicans and talking about high prices and affordability, and it's all Democrats, it's all Republicans' fault, it's all Trump's fault, because he hasn't done anything about it, which, of course, is absolutely crazy, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But right now, they are pissed. All of the far left-wing AOC and the others are criticizing Schumer, saying he should step down and resign. He's definitely going to get primaried by the far left. And they're saying he should step down as speaker and let somebody else. But it wouldn't matter if there was somebody else. The 8 senators, included Fetterton in Pennsylvania. Fetterson, what's his name? Anyway, these guys, these folks are voting for America. They recognize the shutdown is hurting America. That typically, historically, clean CR is a clean resolution to keep the government open while budget policies are negotiated and figured out and agreed to in compromises by both parties. The clean CR doesn't do that, and of course that's what the Democrats wanted to do, was load the CR with Obamacare subsidy policy before agreeing to open the government. And they blame the Republicans for shutting down the government, which of course is nonsense because, as I said, a CR normally gets voted on without policy, and the Republicans refused to pervert that CR historical process by allowing the Democrats to extort them for Obamacare subsidies in order to reopen the government. So 8 of the Democrat senators voted to reopen the government. And as I say, they're all upset because the Democrats now kind of understand it's going to be real hard to get the Republicans to subsidize the Obamacare subsidies when not a single Republican voted for the Obamacare health bill in the first place, and nobody's voted to subsidize it since outside of the COVID vote. So there might be some portion of the subsidies that get left in place by the negotiations that are coming, but it's not going to be what it has been. And it shouldn't be, because every single penny of the Obamacare subsidies are just profits to the insurance companies. These aren't subsidies being given to the American people. This is cash being handed over to the insurance company to deny benefits and keep the cash. And if you hadn't noticed, they've been profitable as hell and paying the CEOs tens of millions of dollars to be so, all at the expense of the taxpayer. Not because they're getting health care, but because the insurance companies are getting the subsidies. It's a direct cash handout to the gatekeeper at the doctor's office without actually paying the doctor or giving the patient any money to pay the doctor. So they shouldn't be in place. They shouldn't be in place. The insurance companies shouldn't be the recipients of billions of dollars of government subsidy because the program Congress wrote is economically inviable. Not viable, never was viable, not from the beginning, not now. It was only viable because it was subsidized in the beginning in the anticipatory hope that enough people would sign up so that the volume would pay for the bills. But they never got the volume because the policies are too damn expensive. And they took away the cheap policies of catastrophic coverage only. So that's not an option, which a lot of people is what they carried. That's all they needed. But the government took that away, and Obamacare policies are now absurdly expensive. And the only people that can afford the best plans are the government employees who have the government pay for it. Of course, they built a plan that only the government can afford. Absolutely insane. So, Obamacare is going to get impacted. The Dems know it, and they're pissed. And they tried to blame the Republicans for the shutdown by screaming about affordability. He hasn't brought the that's absolutely absurd. Trump has brought pricing down. He brought the price of oil down. He brought interest rates down and has stimulated the economy. And the price of oil was initially, back when Biden tried to kill it in his first year with executive orders on the first day in 2020, price of oil went through the roof to over $100, and that drove the price of every product in America up. And that's where your inflation started. And all the price increases happened under Biden. There are no price increases under Trump. And as I told you, when inflation goes down, the prices don't go back. The damage is done once the prices go up. They'll come back a little bit, as Trump has made them do, and they will come back a little bit more if energy stays cheap, which appears to be what he wants to have happen over the next 3 years. So if energy stays cheap, the prices will come back. But that doesn't happen immediately, the same way they immediately all go up when energy goes up, because they have to immediately cover their costs. Now, when prices go down, they feel like they can pocket some of that extra money to make up for when prices went the other way. So it takes them a little while to pass through the lower price to the customer. So the prices don't just drop the same way they race right up. And that's especially true with the other products on the shelves, because again, it takes a while for the price of energy to seep through to the price on the shelf, where other competitors have lowered their price to try and lure more business back to their store. So Trump is trying to reduce prices. All the inflation, all the price increases happened under Biden because of his inflationary policies. And Trump has brought inflation from 9% under Biden all the way back down to just under 3%. It can't quite get it to 2, but it's under 3%. And that's making a huge difference. And the Democrats, in addition to being talking nonsense about affordability because Trump won't bring the prices down. A bunch of idiots. Nobody said a word when they went up under Biden. Now it's all Trump's fault because he can't bring it up. What's he supposed to do? Go to Walmart and dictate what price sticker they put on each piece of product? Good God, people, be reasonable. That's just absolutely insane. You know, the prices didn't go up because of Trump's tariffs in April. That affected the stock market, which went down and then went back up when the tariff seriousness was alleviated by Trump backing off on the tariffs or reducing the amounts or saying we're going to suspend them for a while we negotiate. But those tariffs were not the reason why product prices in America went up. That all happened because of the inflation under Biden, which happened before Trump took office, which he has ameliorated through his energy prices. So he's working on it, but he didn't make it happen. His tariffs didn't make it happen. And the stock market has obviously completely recovered from the tariffs because yesterday it was racing to a new high and today it pulled back a little bit, which is anticipated. But with what, 6-7 trillion in capital still sitting in cash and the money markets on the sidelines looking for a buy-in opportunity at the stock market, it won't drop far before that cash steps up and buys back in to stop the fall and prop the market back up and set it running again, because the earnings being reported by the tech companies are still, well, for the most part, fabulous. So the trend to technology is absolutely there. It's obvious, it's irrefutable, and it's irreversible. And the companies that are leading that will continue to do good business and earn good revenues. And the companies that don't get on board, well, you know, some of them will and some of them won't. What can you say? That's a monkey throwing darts at the dartboard game. So, affordability. How do you give affordability to the American people right away? Because any economic policy you put in place can't make it happen right away. Any kind of economic policy will affect the major institutions and their positions right away, but it will take 3 to 9 months for economic policy to trickle down to Main Street in effect. And that's not providing affordability along the time frames that the people are yelling and demanding it be provided at. And it's maybe the Democrats that are screaming about it, but it's everybody in the country that's concerned about it. So it would be nice if somebody could come up with a policy that would provide real affordability to the American people starting, like, say, first day of next month. Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Okay, I think I hear the first commercial break coming up. When we come back, we're going to get into that, and I'm going to tell you how we can do that. Provide affordability to every American worker starting the first day of the next month. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour. We'll be back in 15 minutes with more. Okay, this is Thomas Fried on the Liberty Works Radio Network, and let's just get right back into this. When the commercial break came up there, I was saying that the whole country has been concerned about, and the Democrats have been particularly loud about making noise about affordability because of Biden's inflation, which they're trying to blame on Trump and his 7 months in administration in conjunction with his tariff acts, which again, as I said, didn't affect the price of products. It affected the stock market, which dropped and has since recovered and again is booming along, as Trump has announced, as I told you a number of months ago, back in May when all of this started, that Trump was using the tariffs not as a way to actually make money, but as the negotiating leverage mechanism that gave him power at the table to force foreign countries to come to the table and renegotiate trade agreements that are more favorable to the United States, which has been taken advantage of by huge numbers of foreign countries that sell their products into our country without penalty or tax, and who actually bar our products from being sold in their country. So it hasn't been a level playing field. America has been subsidizing the development of the entire world by allowing them to produce cheaply without labor laws and sell here at high costs to our consumer market, while barring our companies from selling our products, which are better and more competitive, more technology advantageous, and in the food products are probably cheaper than the commodities. So we're barred, we're locked out while they have unlimited access. Trump has used the tariffs to force a whole bunch of countries, and I'm not even go through the list because it's as long as your arm at this point. The only people left you're still negotiating with really is China. And they, again, have been forced back to the table and appear to be making concessions. Whether they'll live with them or not, who knows? So, the Democrats are yelling and screaming about affordability, and no one seems to be able to come up with any ideas for how to beat affordability. Because, as I said, changing policy won't make it happen next week. That's a trickle-down thing that takes 3 to 6 months to begin to affect, and usually 9 months to a year to actually show any real effect for the whole population. That's not quick enough. How do you restore or create affordability for the entire working class of the American people? I'll tell you how you do it. Why don't you stop collecting income tax from their paychecks? People are losing anywhere from 15 to 30% of their paycheck to income tax withholding, which is a tax that doesn't exist as a tax on your labor. That's been the constitutional fraud, that it's a direct tax on your labor under the 16th Amendment. But the Supreme Court said 1 year ago in Moore et Ux v. United States, 602 U.S. 572, that income taxes are indirect taxes under Article 1. It's not a direct tax under the 16th Amendment. It never was. That's been the fraud perpetrated on the American people by the judicial branch of the government, specifically the circuit court judges, who came up with the communistic ruling that it's a direct unlimited tax under authority of the amendment, despite the fact that there was no enabling enforcement clause to authorize Congress to write any law for any such new tax. So the courts have never been able to show for 80 years that they're authorized to enforce direct tax laws on income without Congress having the authority to write law for such tax. They've just made it up. Made it up. Whole cloth. Out of space and time. No basis in law or constitutional authority whatsoever. None. The whole tax is a fraud. And the reason why your employer withholds it from your paycheck is because you asked him to. Not because the law requires it, but because you asked him to. So we don't even need Congress or the president or anyone to do anything to affect this measure of affordability. You simply claim exempt on a W-4 at work and they have to pay you your whole paycheck except for Social Security. And that would be an effective raise of anywhere from 10 to 25% for every single person working in America ignorant of these tax laws. And all Trump would have to do is say on TV that employers should honor these exempt claims rather than disallow them because the IRS says no. Because the IRS no longer has his authority to say no and interfere with a sworn document, which is what happens when you sign a W-4. Nobody can interfere with that. Nobody can force you to pay a tax before it's legally due. Next year on April 15th. Income tax isn't due when you get paid. It's due next year on April 15th. No one can force you to pay it before then, because that would be a violation of the 13th Amendment's prohibition on involuntary servitude. Because by forcing you to service a possible future obligation for tax before that obligation actually existed in law would be a violation of your constitutional rights. That's why they have the W-4 allowance certificate. They don't call it the employee's withholding allowance certificate because they don't want you to think about the English meaning of the words. They want you to call it a W-4. I think you have to do it because all the other lemmings do it too. It's psychological behavioral control, which I told you is what they were doing with COVID. They want to up it. They've had it since World War II. Your employer withholds the money by your allowance, not because he has to, not because there's a law that says he has to. The only thing the law says is that when you ask him to do it, then he has to do it. But if you don't ask him to do it or claim exempt, he has no legal authority to interfere, and no one can force you to pay it before the tax is due next year on April 15th. That's your pay. It's up to you to manage it. The government doesn't want you to have it, because then you can't use it to exert economic, political, or economic influence or power in your neighborhood. You have to fund their programs out of Washington, D.C., i.e. corruption and global empirical rule. That's what their program is. It's got nothing to do with America or the 50 states or economy in the states. That's not what they're trying to do on the liberal side of the table. They want to rule. They're not happy with representing. That's the nature of humans drawn to the career of politics. They want more power, more, always more. It's never enough. More. That's why we should have term limits that don't let people who were drawn to bureaucratic power and ruling exist in the government as representatives for more than 10 years. 12 for senators, 2 terms for the Senate, 5 terms in Congress. After that, get out. We want someone who will represent, because it takes about that long to get into a position of power where you're actually ruling in Congress. First term, you're learning about the rules in Congress, how nobody's allowed to talk or speak or vote, except on things that are controlled, or when the room is empty. So the way to create affordability is quite obvious and easy to get to. You abolish the withholding of federal income tax from the paychecks of the American people. They were never supposed to be taking it from you to begin with. That would also get rid of the need to file a tax return, because the whole thing's a fraud, which means you need a new tax system, which I've argued before, should be a tax on corporate earnings. The earnings of businesses, not their profits, their earnings. No deductions for expenses or salaries or phone bills. no deductions, no write-downs, no write-offs. Every single penny of every single business, every single month, taxed at 5% of the earnings, sent in on a quarterly or monthly basis. The same way they send in the employee withheld taxes on a quarterly basis, they should be sending in the business proceeds of 5% of the revenues as tax that every single business in the country would have to now pay, becoming a meaningful contributor to the Treasury instead of once a year filing a piece of paper that says, sorry, we didn't have any profits at the end of the year. Yeah, I know. We had 100 million in profit on December 1st. But when December 30th ran around, all that profit had been expensed out. Didn't exist anymore. Oh, that's right. We had 5 million left. Here's your 1.5 million in tax. Thanks, guys. See you next year. And that's how the companies escape taxation. But what happens when you try to deduct your rent or your phone bill or your car or your transportation or your food at work or any of the other expenses that you, just like the corporation, have in order to maintain work? Oh, you get denied. You're taxed on 100% of your revenues. No expenses allowed. Only corporations. Only the corporate person gets to escape the tax by deducting costs and expenses. Because the tax is intended to make you, the laborer, a slave. Or rather, the government's enforcement of it through the IRS as a direct tax under the 16th Amendment. Because the indirect application of the tax, the constitutional version that actually is authorized, only touches the corporate person, the licensed person, commodities, the foreign person, foreign imports, exports, and activities in foreign places where the federal government has the territorial jurisdiction to tax activity, like the possessions of the United States and in foreign countries under a tax treaty. But indirect taxation by impost, duty, and excise doesn't tax the labor of the American people. That's why they've had to lie to you about it being a direct tax under the 16th Amendment. They couldn't get from here. In other words, they couldn't get there under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the only clause of the Constitution that authorizes the taxation of the American people by impost, duty, and excise. The other clauses that authorize taxation demand that those direct taxes be apportioned to the several states for payment. That means they can't ask you, the citizen, to pay a direct tax. It has to be apportioned to the several states for payment. What they've been doing, enforcing against individual citizens the direct tax, is 100% unconstitutional. And that's essentially what the Supreme Court said 1 year ago in the Moore decision, which now can be argued to have displaced every single circuit court decision being invoked in every single circuit court in America in order to try and appear or create the appearance of justifying the existence of the tax and its enforcement in its current form as a direct tax without limitation that's unavoidably imposed on everything you earn. Not profit, everything you earn. The whole thing's a fraud from top to bottom. Every element of it: direct fraud, graduated fraud, labor fraud, mandatory fraud, authority to enforce fraud, subject matter jurisdiction in the court fraud. Every single element of the tax is fraud. And the way to give affordability to the American people next week is to stop the withholding of the tax from their paychecks and let them take home 95% of the pay. 93.5, 6.5 for Social Security. Okay, I think I hear the second commercial break coming up. When we come back, we're going to talk about how to fix the housing crisis in America. That's right, I got that on tap for you too. This is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We'll be back in 5 with more. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's go ahead and get this finished up. As the commercial break came on there, I was saying that we have the solution to the housing crisis in America. At least what I think could be a big part of the solution, which is that in America, well, one, Republicans argue you've let in 25, 30 million illegal aliens. They're taking up housing space that should be available to citizens, which might help alleviate the problem. But they're here, and you can't kick everybody out. That's just not reasonable. You do the criminals and deal with everything else across time and compromises. But the other problem, of course, is that a number of states and places that have drawn a lot of population, like California, have put in place local building regulations that prevent building. But the real problem with the housing market is that it's unaffordable. Prices are too high because of the lack of shortage of houses for sale, but also because mortgage interest rates are way too high. Mortgage interest rates at 7% are prohibitive for house buyers, which for the last 20 years have been dealing with mortgage interest rates, I think, of under 3%. It's been pretty much a subsidized 0% interest rate since Obama, and that has kept interest rates for housing purchases low until things exploded under Biden with the inflation that he created. And interest rates went up to and above 7%. They've pulled back to about 6.5%, 7%. But when people look at those rates and the numbers associated with repaying a loan at that rate, it becomes frightening. And the numbers are frightening because here's how they break down. If you take a $150,000 loan at, I think I did the figures on an 8% interest rate, you will need a 30-year term with a monthly payment of $1,100. And at the end of that 30-year term, you will have repaid approximately $400,000 to the bank for a $150,000 loan. That's $250,000 of profit to the bank for a $150,000 loan and 30 years of servicing debt to the homeowner, which is obviously oppressive and too high. So, how do you fix that? Well, what you have to do is figure out how to get rid of that 7% interest rate or 8% interest rate. Because if you can give that party a 2% interest rate, here's what happens to the numbers. First of all, you no longer need a 30-year term. You can repay the loan at 2% in 15 years with a monthly payment of $750. That's $350 less than the monthly payment on the 30-year term. And at the end of the 15-year term, you will have repaid $185,000, or only $35,000 of interest on a $150,000 loan from the bank in 15 years. Now that makes housing affordable. The difference between the 3% and the 8% makes the housing rate affordable. So what should happen is the federal government should guarantee at 2% loans, they should provide the loans at 2% to primary residence purchasers. People buying a primary residence should be given a government subsidized, actually it wouldn't be subsidized, just a direct rate of 2 or 3% on the loan that should be assumable if the original borrowing party walks away from the loan, so that they can pass the loan to the next buyer and take the profit above the loan. And this way, the loans will always be all repaid because there's no way for a buyer to get a better loan than the 2% assumable, which is already partially paid by the party they're buying the loan from. So this is how you provide housing, you fix the housing shortage. What are they talking about as their idea? Oh, their idea is, that's right, it's a 50-year mortgage. A 50-year mortgage. They really want you to become a slave to the home. 50-year mortgage. That's not really a viable solution, is it? No, that's not. That just exacerbates the problem of you paying too much across too much time for something that the government should be helping you to buy, because the Federal Reserve Bank shouldn't be allowed to have a monopoly on interest rates all across the country. This is unconstitutional control of the monetary system. The federal government, if you're going to have a Federal Reserve Bank and this kind of monetary system, it should operate for the benefit of the people, not the institutions, which is how it's operating now. And one of the few ways you can make the system operate for the benefit of the American people is to have this system of a HUD-provided loan for 2% to purchasers of primary residences. Of course, you have to put a limit on the amount of the loan that's going to go for a primary residence purchase. I don't know if it's 150 or 250. That would have to be, set in law on how to do this. But this is the way to provide it, is to get rid of the private bank's control of the interest rate that compels the American people to service the monetary system, benefiting the private bank, not the American people or their governance. So that's what needs to happen. I need to take just a momentary break here. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I had some background noise I had to eliminate. So there you go. Affordability. Let the American people take home their whole paycheck. Get rid of the federal income tax, both the withholding and the filing and payment of it on April 15th. The whole thing's been a fraud. Taxfreedom.com, you get lots more info on that. And fix the housing crisis? Well, how do you get rid of too many state regulations interfering with the ability or willingness to build affordable housing? I mean, that's a problem that can only be addressed locally. And that's the problem, isn't it? All the Democrats, all the wealthy Democrats yelling and screaming about affordable housing, but not in my neighborhood. No, 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 not in my neighborhood. Don't do it here. Don't do it here. Total hypocrites, right? How do you get rid of that? That's an inbred state problem. California, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., pick a city. You can't build anywhere affordable housing in a nice neighborhood. Oh, look, here we have some projects from the 60s. Why don't you build your housing there? Excuse me? What, you want me to put people in as it is, or spend $1 billion redoing it? For people who don't pay rent, where it's rent control subsidized. How are you going to get rid of that? You can't. You have to let the states work that out. The only thing you can do is make the economic aspect of the whole escapade more affordable by providing an interest rate. The interest rate, whatever the interest rate is that the government borrows at, the prime rate, that's what should be passed through directly to the primary residence purchaser. And that way the money will be put to work for the American people within a mechanism that ensures, by assumption of the loans, that every single loan will always be repaid. So that's where we need to go with that. Okay, there's not much time left here. What are we going to do with the last 5 minutes? Oh, you know what we should talk about? We should talk about how it's coming out, how weaponized the Department of Justice was under Joe Biden. It's come out, of course, that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor appointed to go after Trump in the Mar-a-Lago and other case, I believe, was had subpoenaed the telephone records, emails, texts of 8 different Republican senators, not because they had any evidence at all that any of them had ever done anything wrong at all, but because they were conservative Republicans and assumed and perceived as being in positions of influence or leadership. They weaponized the entire Justice Department against the Republicans in the Senate. And of course, this is just the consequences of the whole system having been weaponized right from January 6th by Nancy Pelosi, who set the whole thing up. She set the whole insurrection thing up. She refused to allow the Capitol Police to be deployed before January 6th when they were specifically requested by Trump and the Capitol Hill in the Congress chief of police. I don't think he's called the chief of police. I forget what his title is, but he's the guy that runs the security in the Congress, and he specifically asked for it and was told no. They were told no by both Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser, the D.C. mayor. So they tried to have National Guard there. Pelosi said no. And then the police, of course, must have been given orders to not obstruct the crowd. They stepped back and let them in and just stood there watching as more and more people went in, and most of it, even inside the Capitol, especially inside the Capitol, most of it wasn't violent. It was just people wandering around. There's thousands of hours of people milling around and doing what the police tell them to do, and the police actually guiding them through the building. And the next thing you know, it's not a peaceful protest with people walking through the building. It's an insurrection. And a dozen people died. And a lot of Democrats still believe that nonsense. The only person that died that day was an female Air Force veteran who was one of the protesters. And she was shot while unarmed by a Capitol Police officer who panicked and unnecessarily shot her as she came through a broken window of a door separating 2 rooms and compartments. She wasn't carrying anything. She wasn't threatening anyone. Other people were already through the room, in the room. She was just following them through, and he pulls a gun and shoots her. No warning, no weapon, no threat. And then they hid the police officer for 6 months on a military base and wouldn't release his name, and there's never been an investigation. I think Judicial Watch might be suing for the records. It was a cover-up. The whole shooting was a cover-up. Anyway, she's the only person that died, and the next thing we know, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are prosecuting for insurrection, holding them for 2 years without trial and sentencing them to the years in prison. The whole thing was a setup to weaponize the political and justice system against conservative Republicans willing to protest. Meanwhile, we had to watch 4 years of Black Lives Matter rioters burn down the cities. Oh, they're mostly peaceful. Ignore the fires in the background. It's mostly peaceful. The whole system was weaponized, and Jack Smith went out of his way to go after the Republican senators. Now, we need accountability, and thank God Nancy Pelosi has announced her retirement. I say it again, good riddance. Get the hell out of town. Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. We'll be back next week with more. Where's the break? It's always late.